Supergirl has flown its way into theaters, meaning we have 3 live-action movies with Supergirl in them. So I'm going to rank the 3 live-action Supergirl movies. Hi, my name is Nathan, and I like to talk about a lot of movies on this channel. If you're new here, down below in the comment section, share your ranking of the 3 live-action Supergirl movies over on my channel. I have more content like this. Check those out once this video is over. If you enjoyed the video, click the like button, be sure to subscribe because that really does help a lot. With all that said, let's just get straight into it. Easily in last place for me, Supergirl 1984. This is truly one of the worst superhero movies that has ever been written, produced, directed, shot, and even released in theaters. It just does not work on any comprehensible level in any way you spin it. Right off the bat, just breaking down what this movie is, the movie just has an atrocious setup that sets up a plot that only goes downhill from there. The setup is essentially that Supergirl's father gives her the power source to her city, and she starts playing with it. It gets lost in space and lands somewhere on Earth, just so that Supergirl has to accidentally go into a pod and fly off to Earth and try to get the power source to her city back. Right off the bat, that just seems like a plot for a movie that maybe like a 5-year-old could write a better inciting incident for the conflict in the superhero movie. And then from there, it only goes downhill when you go to Earth and it moves into Supergirl going to college for the next 45 minutes of the film. And it just comes off as really, really boring to see the Supergirl high school drama and stuff. It just feels so out of place for what the movie was just setting up, and I have to get the power source to my city back. From there, the main conflict involves a witch that casts a spell on a guy that knocks him out, and when he wakes up, the first woman he sees, he falls in love with because she likes this guy. And then what ends up happening in this contrived scenario is he walks off, wanders out on the street, Supergirl saves him from being like in a bulldozer or something, and he sees her and he's in love with Supergirl, and this is the main conflict between our villain and Supergirl. This is just a really weird and straight out bad premise for a superhero movie that's executed in a very, very boring manner. It's a movie that you watch and it makes you think, who greenlit this? There's nothing in this movie that's entertaining, that's watchable. It's truly just one of the worst superhero movies that's ever been made. Number 2 is going to be Supergirl 2026. And to be clear, there's a pretty massive gap between Supergirl 1984 and Supergirl 2026. Now, if you've seen my review of Supergirl 2026, I wasn't the most positive on the film, but it's not one of the worst superhero movies ever made the way Supergirl 1984 is. There are quite a bit of things that I did like in this movie. Jason Momoa, I think, is clearly having a lot of fun on set. I think Millie Alcock has the ability and can play a great Supergirl if she was given the right material. But with the material she's given, she does the best that she can do. And it's a movie that is trying to be a little bit different than James Gunn's Superman, but overall, the movie just felt very, very mediocre on every single level. There are no memorable characters in this movie when it comes to the sidekick of Supergirl, the little girl, and the villain of the movie is completely forgettable and also just looks really ridiculous and maybe gets 30 words of dialogue in this film. And it's just, the entire movie feels like that. It's very meh. It's very forgettable. Like, you're not pulled into the story the way you are in Superman 2025, and I think that's a big sabotage and a stab in the back for this film, is that it just doesn't feel like it has anything new to offer, because the plot is also very standard, generic revenge plot that we're following 2 characters who want to get revenge for something against something. And it just feels like it never pulls you in. It never feels like there's an actual sense of tension. Like, it doesn't do anything to pull you into it. And the character of Supergirl is not really explored very well. So thus you have a main character that's not explored the best, that I would compare to Captain Marvel in her 2019 movie, and also a set of side characters that are even more forgettable and bland and dull. And the entire movie also just feels bland and dull when you're contrasting it with Superman, which is so bright and colorful and has so much life to it and a bright color palette and everything. And Supergirl, you're traveling from planet to planet to planet, but the environments are brown and dirty and drab and dull. The final battle takes place in the middle of nowhere. And so for me, this just felt like a very dull addition to this new DC universe and kind of a whimper. It tries to distract you from this by having needle drops, but a lot of that end up coming up very bizarre. So overall, this is a movie that ultimately didn't work. I hope the DCU is better in the future, but I'm getting a little bit worried about this universe now. But in first place for me is The Flash. Now, The Flash is a movie that kind of barely qualifies as a Supergirl movie, but Supergirl is one of the major characters in this movie that plays a major part in this film. So thus, I will include it on this list. And of these three movies, I feel like this is the one that I easily enjoyed the most. Now, I understand a lot of you guys really hate this movie. It's a movie that was surrounded by controversy at the time of its release, especially given the controversy surrounding Ezra Miller and his real-life legal issues that were questionable, to say the least. And the movie itself was just... It was stabbed in the back because it released at a time after James Gunn announced he'd be rebooting the entire continuity. So every movie that came out after that kind of flopped, and even with the return of Michael Keaton and everything, the movie was failing at the box office. But on rewatch, this is an overall flawed film, but I've always thought this was a solid DC movie. Where at its core, it has a very solid emotional core with a character who's ultimately you could feel for and is relatable to a lot of people. He's a character who kind of in a way lost both of his parents. He lost his mom and he lost his dad when he went off to jail when he was wrongfully accused. So he lost both of his parents as a child and is and he finds a way to potentially bring his parents back, and that tempts him. And there's something just very compelling about that. And the scenarios in which it plays out leads to some very emotional scenes near the end of the film with Barry and his mother and his ability to finally let go. And I think that's actually a great little arc for the Flash in this movie. It's, of course, pulling from great storylines such as the Flashpoint paradox. Like I said, it ties into the multiverse. So it's very fun to see Michael Keaton be Batman again ever since Tim Burton's Batman movies back in the 80s and 90s. It's very fun to see him back in that role again. Nice callbacks, and it's just a real treat. I think he's really good in the film as well. Supergirl, well, I have to talk about Supergirl here now because I'm talking about a video where I'm talking about Supergirl movies. The Supergirl character, I think, is the way they use her is very interesting in this film. She herself is a character that's not very interesting, but the way they use her is more interesting than the character itself. But Sasha Calle does deliver a good performance as a character. I just don't think she's the strongest part of this movie, despite it being in first place. Now, the movie has some wonky and bad CGI, I understand, and I felt that like there was a lot of times when I saw this movie in the theater that the theater was laughing, and it wasn't a humorous scene, it was just because the CGI was terrible. A lot of the humor falls very flat for me, where you got like Batman and the Flash touching lasso of truth and saying very these very bad dialogue for jokes.
And crime and poverty.
Oh, I know sex exists. I've just never experienced it.
And the final battle, once again, just like Supergirl 2026, is set in the middle of nowhere, and it feels very anticlimactic when you get to the end of it. But at the end of the day, of these three movies, I feel like this is easily the one with the best emotional core and the best lead character to follow on. And I think the most entertaining of these three movies. Thus, by those kind of low standards, I wouldn't give this movie a great review or anything. I'd probably give it a B or something like that. But by these low standards of these three films, The Flash is my favorite live-action Supergirl film. Well, that's my ranking of the 3 live-action Supergirl films over on my channel. There's more content like this. Check those out right now. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end. I'll see you in the next one.